Destination Africa, brought to you by Standard Bank.
Sarah, I'm going to start off with you, just looking at sub-Saharan Africa, broad strokes here. When it comes to the ease of doing business, how would you rate this part of the continent, and to what extent do we have to be pretty discerning when making this assessment?
Well, just to go directly to the World Bank Doing Business indicators, if you look at those data, only 7 sub-Saharan African countries are in the top half of those scores, and that's out of 183 countries in total. So in terms of what we're getting from the data, it looks like the regulatory environment isn't great. If you look at the market outcomes associated with the regulatory environment, so for example, price being typically a really good indicator of competitive outcomes. You see very high prices in sectors which typically need some form of economic regulation. So telecommunications, extremely high. Transport prices, the most expensive region in the world by some measures. Banking interest charges, the only region that seems to be more expensive is Latin America. So there are indicators that this is not a region where regulatory outcomes are currently that good.
Yeah, work clearly needs to be done, Francisco, but certainly strides are being made by some countries, and I know Rwanda, for one, stands out as a case in point. There are perceptions, though, and while investors are becoming, to a degree, slightly more discerning, starting to view countries more so as separate entities, are perceptions still a hindrance when it comes to businesses setting up shop on the continent, where regulation in one country could have a dampening effect on investment in another?
Yeah, I think the important point is that what most sort of investors want to see from a sort of regulatory point of view is predictability, and the fact that their money, when they put it in a country, is protected. Now you'll go from one country to another and you find different, I think, regulatory environments and different levels of stability. And that's the big thing. But if you look at sub-Saharan Africa, in the main, there is a growing trend of predictability from a regulatory framework. I think largely because of some reforms that have happened in the past 10 or 20 years, really, from a constitutional and legal reform to establish that. Then you have to start segmenting different countries, because we come from, different legacies from sort of a colonial past. So you're looking at an English-based system, a French-based system. Some of them are quite rudimentary. And so I think when you say from a region point of view, what sort of assessment do you make? I think from a legal perspective, you almost have to dissect them. But the sense is that you can actually, with a bit of investigation, establish what the rules of the game are, which is what clients usually look for. Okay.
Certainly. Let's bring Mustafa into the conversation at this point, because we've had a lot of reform taking place over in Nigeria, Mustafa, and it's pertained specifically to the banking arena. This at a point where corruption was almost synonymous with the West African country. How are you seeing changing perceptions when it comes to doing business in Nigeria from the investors that you liaise with?
Well, I think the fundamental weakness the Nigerian economy faced over time was that of a situation whereby things were not done in the most transparent manner. And since coming of democracy, we have introduced doing business in the most transparent manner and trying to embrace global best practices. And we have also addressed those issues that really were incentives, to corruption, as you mentioned. For example, before the advent of democracy, we never had any effective or efficient mortgage system. We never had health insurance system. We never had pension system. We never had any consumer credit system. Now, all these have been introduced, and they have made doing business much easier, particularly for the public officers, as well as in their interaction with the private sector. So I think I will say a lot has been achieved in terms of addressing the issue of corruption. And then on the issue of driving investment, the president himself led all of us in talking to very serious business groups and business community members. And this has led again in moving our foreign direct investment stock from only 3.8 billion in 1999 to over 60 billion as I speak to you today. So I think that shows that at least a lot is really happening in Nigeria.
How is that translated into actual investment flow into Nigeria?
Yeah, well, looking at the aggregate of 3.8 billion stock from 1999 to over 60 translates to an average of 6 billion per annum. We reached the peak of 12 billion in 2008, and all this are as a result of the reforms introduced, pushing the private sector to be the driver, as well as the government, the public sector becoming the facilitator and creating the right environment. We are still reforming and trying to enhance the investment environment, through creation of competitive, and sound policies which are being worked upon. And I'm sure as soon as government, passes and endorses those sound policies, we'll even see much more happening despite the global financial challenge.
Sarah, we know that the interest is there, and if anything, the financial global crisis has diverted attention away from developed economies to emerging and frontier markets in sub-Saharan Africa as well. So let's look at a few red tape issues here that could well be hindering us taking full advantage of the position we're finding ourselves in at the moment.
One of the problems you have when you introduce a new regulatory system is that it takes quite a bit of time to actually get up to speed, to get, for example, in competition enforcement, a competition authority has an act that it needs to interpret by means of precedent. When it has no precedent because it's seen no cases, it's difficult for investors to understand how their particular case will be interpreted. And to some extent, you only get this kind of certainty over time. So with any luck over the next 10 years or so, we will start seeing more maturity in regulatory institutions in the region, which should bear fruit in and of itself.
Of course, there's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy that comes along with starting a business. We're not just looking at organic business growth, though. I mean, there's a lot of M&A activity in South Africa. We've got a couple of deals in the pipeline. Kansai, with regards to Free World Coatings. We've got the more prominent Walmart and Massmart transaction as well. And we've got regulatory issues around competition law that really presents itself in those instances.
I mean, we talk about, competition law being sort of, in some instances, a red tape issue. Most of these multinational entities are used to competition law. You talk about antitrust law in the US, you talk about competition law in Europe, they're used to those things. I mean, for instance, in the South African context, our regulatory framework from a competition law perspective is actually ranks quite well with similar global arrangements. The only issue is the speed with which the matters go through the different competition bodies. Okay, that's the sort of comment that we usually get from some of the clients that we deal with, who would say, we wish this would happen faster. In the past 2 years, we've seen major global players who are interested in coming in, investing in South Africa, and then using South Africa as a base to expand into the continent. You talk about Walmart, that's what they want to do. You were talking about the guys want to HSBC. We look at Old Mutual. They wanted to form a base here. So that tells you that people do see the place as an attractive environment. The regulatory framework is quite stable.
Having said that, Sarah, I mean, and not just in South Africa, globally, we've seen it in Canada as well, Namibia even. It seems like by way of the new economic era, there seems to be a kind of protectionist mentality that's emerging. Do you see that emerging and hindering some of the, the processes that go along with setting up shop?
Very much so. There is a trend towards increasing Africanization policies or BEE policies in South Africa, which does tend to hinder international investment and just hinders investment as a whole. It throws grit into the gears of the market, slows its workings. So if I can just return to a point on competition law, to some extent competition law is an increase in the amount of red tape that a business faces. But you must also remember that there's a dividend, a payoff for international firms. And if I can talk here maybe about the liquor market in South Africa, you have a strong local incumbent with SAB and an international entrant, Brand House. who currently stands to benefit from the competition action being undertaken against SAB. So where you have local monopolies with very small closed markets, putting in place competition regulation actually has the potential to open the market to international investors.
Well, Mustafa, over in Nigeria, we've got the petroleum industry bill that's looking to be brought into play on that. And let's use that as a case in point within the Nigerian context. In your view, is it help or hindrance towards investment in the oil and gas space, or is it not as clear-cut as that?
Well, I'm not sure whether any law introduced by any country is to favor one side and eliminate the other. I believe the introduction of it actually is substantially as a result of the outrage we have seen that has created the restiveness in the Niger Delta. And as a means by a government to really bring in particularly the citizens of this country to be participants in the operations of the oil and gas industrial sector. Take, for example, certain services, fundamental services, key services, which can be sourced locally, are being outsourced at an exorbitant rate, to the disadvantage of the Nigerian, operators in that sector. And that's essentially why government brought it in. Yeah. But to talk about the issue of competition, I think we don't have a strong competition law in place, and I know the National Assembly is working on it. But the key regulators, for example, if you take the regulator in the telecom industrial sector, that is the Nigerian Communication Commission, has done so well. We have four strong GSM companies today that are doing very well because the environment is attractive and the competition is allowed, among them. And we have seen beginning of crash of rates, of these GSM companies as a result of that kind of environment that has been created. We have equally at the NIPC been able to provide, at least window for quick entry into the Nigerian economy, which I believe, again, is another effort to make doing business much, much easier and quicker in Nigeria. So I think the oil and gas you have mentioned, I believe government's intention is actually to take into account the concerns of the restive communities in the Niger Delta as well as the overall interests of Nigerians.
And it's exactly that clarity of message, Sarah, that's so important. So let's take a look at that, because in the mining sector locally, there's quite a bit of unease around mining regulation. We had Anglo American's Chief Whip, Cynthia Carroll, getting pretty vocal about what the lack of clarity is actually spelling for investment into the country. Let's take a look at that and the role clarity plays.
Well, I mean, with the type of investment that you're looking at making at something like mining, you're making a very large capital investment with a payoff where the investment is very separated in time from the payoff. And in those conditions, a small change to a financial model, a couple of years delay, a small change in the percentage rate return that you expect can completely blow out the profitability of a given model. So with something like mining, it's very important to have as much certainty as possible in the build-up phase. And what this means from the perspective of the overall economy is, in a very uncertain environment, you get a couple of big projects where people can make megabucks, because the extremely high profit margins means that no matter what the uncertainty, you're pretty sure you're going to make a profit. In a stable economy, you have much more investment taking place, many more projects, many more jobs created, much more investment, much more exports. So in terms of wider, broader-based economic growth, stability is the way forward.